Hello and welcome to Mindset Matters with me, Ciara. In this episode, I chat to Tammy Darcy. Tammy founded the Shona Project, an organisation that works to support and empower girls and young women. Tammy shares her own experiences of the traumas she faced as a young person. We also talk about the challenges young women face today, the significance of community and purpose for young people, as well as the role of mentorship in fostering self-worth for young women. Tammy emphasises the collective responsibility of society to support young women and the broader impact that empowering them has on families, workplaces and communities. Hi Tammy, and thank you for joining me on Mindset Matters. We'll start off if you tell me a bit about yourself and why you set up the Shona Project and what the Shona Project does.
Sure. So I set it up because I had quite a difficult experience myself during my teenage years. I, had gone from becoming like a straight A student with loads of confidence over the space of a year to a student who wasn't even showing up for school, who was failing, who had no confidence, who was completely isolated from the world. Um, and it was only years later, that I realized what support I needed during that time and the fact that I didn't get that support and what a difference it would have made to me in terms of my own development, my confidence and like my future. So that was obviously a big, huge thing for me. I completely gave up on school, became a single parent as a teenager, and didn't even apply for college at the time, which was a real difference from the little girl who had just this huge amount of potential that wasn't realized. So that's where it came from. It's called after my sister Shona. And it's one of those kind of perfect storm of trauma things that I was going through during that time when I was 14 was that she, as my older sister, was diagnosed with a brain tumor and required really serious interventions and ended up living in full-time nursing care. So, it really was trauma after trauma after trauma during that year. And now what we've tried to create is a community for the young women of Ireland where they realise that their traumas are not shameful, that their traumas don't define them, that it's their response to those traumas, where we give girls space to figure out what being a woman means to her and how she can celebrate that, and how our communities can celebrate that, and hopefully she'll achieve her potential through our community. So yeah, long answer, but it's a tricky question.
No, that's a lovely answer. So just tell me, I suppose empowering young girls and young women is one of the things that the Shona Project does. What are your principles when it comes to empowering yourself?
I think everything changed for me when I felt free to be authentic. The previous roles that I had, it was very much, leave your personality, your trauma, your life and your character at the door and kind of mold yourself into, it wasn't corporate life, it was a public sector job, but it was like, you dress a certain way for work, you speak a certain way in work, everybody says the same thing in the same way. And I felt that when I became able to be authentic and to embody the type of leadership that felt authentic to me, that's when I really figured out that that's when good things happen. And that's when people start to take notice and, value you more because they're seeing who you really are.
So what helped you be authentic, do you think?
I think it was that response to it was the response to it, really. Like I had the idea in my head for many years of starting the Shona Project, and I was afraid to say it out loud because it was a very vulnerable position to put me in. There was no safety, there was very little control and very little predictability in the role. But as I said, I was able to be myself, and when I started telling my story, I think women and other people started to see themselves in me and the story that I was telling, and they wanted to be a part of what I'm trying to achieve, because it's not for me, it's for every girl. And yeah, I realized that vulnerability. And also another big thing for me was, I always thought that if you were a leader, you had to have all the answers, that you
Mm.
needed to know exactly what you were doing, and you didn't have the space to figure it out, that everybody looked at you for, that level of knowledge. And again, I reframed that, and that, no, what I actually need to have is all the right questions. And that was like really freeing for me, because, still I ask questions of our interns, I ask questions of our girls, and I realize that their perspectives are vitally important, if not, and probably more important than mine. And I just have to take those perspectives and make smart decisions based on the information that I have. So yeah, I definitely think authenticity, but also curiosity is a big one for me when it comes to feeling empowered in the role that I have.
And just tell me, so why do you think it's important to support young girls in the way that the Shona Project does? What does it do for them?
Um, Primarily, it's about, as I said, defining what being a woman means to them, because they're being promoted a very narrow view and an unsustainable view of what a woman should be. It's causing huge amounts of anxiety. It's making a lot of people a lot of money, but it's not serving the girls themselves. So I think that in what we do, it's not telling them what they should do and how they should think. Because again, there's a lot of people telling them you should be positive and you should have gratitude and you should, feel confident. Um, so we're not saying that. What we're saying is, let's create a space while you figure that out, and let's not have shame over
Mm.
mistakes that we've made or perceived flaws or any of those things. Let's celebrate those things. So we basically rebranded being a girl.
Yeah. When you empower a young girl, what does that do for them?
I mean, we've seen huge differences in the girls that we work with, where even take, for example, Shine Festival, which is a festival that we hold every year that's attended by about 2,500 girls. If you were to stand on the door as they walk in and then stand on the door as they walk out, you'll
Yeah.
visually see the difference. They kind of come in quietly and like safety in their groups, and not knowing what to expect and being nervous, because they're all very nervous of anything that's different from the usual. um and then they're singing and dancing and hugging each other and smiling and laughing as they leave, and that's kind of a real visual representation of what we do. um but it's also about creating that, we create the safe community in the room at that festival, but we also do that in schools as well, where girls are feeling safe going into schools because they know the other girls will have their backs, that they don't have to all get on or like each other, but they'll respect each other and care for each other. And that's what every girl and every woman needs at the end of the day.
Yeah, so true. What do you think are the challenges that young people face these days?
Um, well, we released research earlier this year, which we call the perfect storm, because we're always asked that question, what's the biggest challenge? And we say it's all of the challenges all of the time, relentlessly. And it is that, bombardment of messaging that you should look a certain way and you should act a certain way and you should have these things and you should be using 20-step skin routines and your eyebrows should be up here and you should be fitting into this outfit. Um, and a lot of girls intrinsically know that's not what they believe.
Yeah.
Like, they intrinsically know that this is not right, and I'm never going to achieve this. Or if I do achieve this level of perfection in terms of looks by the time I get to 18, I'll be trying to hold on to it for the next, however many decades.
Yeah.
So I think they live in a world where they look around them and they see, well, this world is very different to the one my own mother grew up in. I'm being bombarded with horrific imagery of death and mutilation through war. I'm being told consistently that it's my responsibility to keep myself safe. In a world where I am not the problem. I'm unlikely to be able to afford a house ever in my lifetime. And there's a huge waiting list for driving tests, and I'll be measured in school for a very specific type of skill set. And, it's consistent and it's all the time.
Yeah. Um, it sounds like it's a lot tougher from my own memory from the, growing up myself. But if you like, where do you start with somebody who's so, you know, bogged down with all of that? Where do you start with them and how do you help themselves or empower themselves to pick themselves up and keep going?
I think the first thing to do is to call it out, because I think a lot of young girls, they see it and they're like, am I the only one who can see this?
Yeah.
Because nobody's talking about it. And once you call it out and have conversations about it, you take the power, hopefully, away from that conversation. And then once we give ourselves permission to think about what it is that we want from the world, not what the world wants from us, um, I think that's step one. And then also, I really believe, it's about doing it in large communities. Like
Hmm.
if one girl has that realization, she's going to look around and realize that she's in the minority. Whereas if you can get a group, whether it's in a classroom or at an event, to start to think about things differently, then they all support each other and hopefully get there together.
Yeah. Um, that industry that feeds us that image of what we should be and what we should say and what we should do as women. Um, do you think that its grip is starting to loosen a bit? That there are more people now questioning it, and with people like Pamela Anderson deciding that she's not going to wear makeup or bow down to that way of being anymore. Do you think that that is going to start the shift, or will it always have a grip?
I can't see it losing its grip completely. Um, like even if you go back to our generation,
Mm,
like we were the circle of shame generation. So there's aspects of this that go back generations and generations, like what a woman is worth
yeah.
and what she should look like in terms of body shape, things like that.
Hmm.
Like we all got that. Um, but it's been compounded and compounded. And while there's a conversation out there around body positivity and about a different kind of value on women, I think the dark side of it is getting darker. Um, so I don't really know where it's going to go. I think when you have somebody like Pamela Anderson do that great work, when it's a couple, it's a novelty. It's not the norm. So we needed to get to the norm where
Yeah.
people and young women can look at two ways of living and see that both are wide open for them, that they're not going to stand out for, making a decision that I'm not going to wear makeup or I'm not going to buy into this.
Hmm.
And that just becomes her community. And it's kind of easier for people like Pamela Anderson to do
Yeah.
that because she's like a stunningly beautiful woman anyway. And she's already established. If she had done that at 23,
Yeah.
would she have been as successful? I don't know. So I definitely think there's more of us need to do it. I think it needs to be modelled at home. I think
Yeah.
this is something I really struggle with. I have well, she's now 20, but I had to work very, very hard over the years to not only not let my assumptions and
Yeah.
my hang-ups go to her, but also to kind of challenge the ones that the world was trying to put on her as well. And it's not easy because, you can feel, it can feel like it's a losing battle, but doesn't mean you don't fight it.
Yeah, this is it. So what do you do? Like when your 20-year-old comes home to you and says, I want to get lip fillers or I want to get my boobs done, or like, I'm not saying that this is what has happened, but you know, how do you handle that conversation? And whilst not putting your own sort of, oh no, I don't think you should do that, giving them the power to make the decision with all their information. Like, where do you start with that?
I haven't had that experience myself to that level. I mean, she's got some tattoos. I have some feelings about that for sure. Um, but, I always go back to, again, in our day when having, a piercing at the top of your ear or, dyeing your hair pink was seen
Hmm.
as the end of the world. Or, my husband often talks about like you couldn't wear jeans to mass. Like that was a
Yeah.
big no-no. Um, he got a strong reaction at home from wearing Doc Martens. back in the day. So, I try to equate it for that. And I really
Yeah.
feel like I think it's about having open communication with your kids. I think it's about asking them, catching it early, hopefully before it gets to that stage, by constantly reinforcing them with confidence, not cockiness or not like
No.
uh, entitlement, but just
Yeah.
confidence, and trying to build their worth around who they are
Yeah.
as people, and attaining it to that, and not how they look like or what they look like. But like, what would your friends say about you? Asking them every day, what would your friends say you did today that was kind? Or, and also asking them what they love about the people in their lives.
Yeah.
Like if you ask them why they love their granny, they're not going to say because she's clear skin and you know nice lips. They would say because she just makes me feel special and she takes care of me, and they're the things. So it's about constant narrative at home, I feel,
Yeah.
and catching your own the way that you've been conditioned to, because it's very, very hard for our generation to unpick it at this stage.
Yeah.
I don't know if we ever will,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. No, it is. It's a job in itself. um, so what do you believe then empowers young people? I know you've spoken about being real, sense of self and, self-worth. What more can we do to empower?
I think there's two things that every young person needs. One is community, and the
Yeah.
second one is purpose. And if you can provide young people with those two things in a way that works for them,
Mhm.
then I think you've won half the battle. Now, when I say community, it might not be their school. I mean,
Yeah.
their school might be the opposite of that,
Hmm.
but it could be, and it doesn't have to be people their age. It could be mentors. It could be, finding something that they enjoy, which also brings in the purpose, right?
Yeah.
Maybe the Leaving Cert is not their purpose,
No.
but maybe the Leaving Cert will help them to get to their purpose. So, that they're motivated by creating change, they're motivated by creating art, they're motivated by connection or expression or whatever it is, but that you encourage them to find and to build both of those things, because it takes them out of their own heads a little
Hmm.
bit. It
Yeah.
helps them realize the impact of being a good person in the world. So yeah, I would say those are the two things that I would say every young person needs.
And with the Shona Project, like if somebody was to go looking for you or to look for that community, what do you provide for young people in terms of those things?
Well, mostly we work through the schools, so we have delivered school workshops to over 40,000 girls, and that like makes it easier for us. So rather than engaging with one young girl, we
Yeah.
engage with the school, which gives us access to hundreds at a time. So we do provide a lot of programs through the schools, like our mentorship program, our ambassador program, the festival that we run, the handbooks that we give out. All of those things come through the schools. So I would say school, if your school hasn't engaged with us and it's a girls' school, tell them they definitely should. The other thing then is girls are in two communities, I suppose, the school community and online, and we have a really strong online presence. And what we try to do with our social media in particular is to, like, for every 10 posts that a girl sees that tells her she's not good enough, she'll see one from us that will remind her that she is. Um, and again, hopefully then they'll seek out more positive content through their social media feeds, and realize, well, when I see this, I feel this way. When I see this, I feel better equipped.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what we try to do. So, I mean, there's other ways as well, but it's usually through the schools and through our online community that we run campaigns or awareness
Hmm.
pieces, or just, yeah, building our community.
Yeah. And you mentioned there, I thought it was really interesting about sometimes school isn't community for young people. And I think a lot of that would resonate with a lot of young people. So, like, as a society and in our own communities in general, what can be done to better empower and elevate young people so that they can live their best lives? If they're not feeling like school is where they belong, or if times are tough at home, what should I do to make sure that I'm creating a better world for young girls?
So we have created a community over the last, which we've launched in the last 6 months, called 500 by 500. And it's because we meet professional women primarily, but also a lot of men and a lot of small businesses that they want to show the next generation that we're showing up for them,
Hmm.
and they don't know how to do it in a big way. But it's a community of women that each either donate or fundraise €500 a year. Um, so that's a big growing community, but also we tap into that community then, like we hold events for that community, we get them involved in different ways when we have shout outs for help or support. So that's one way. But I would say if you're not engaged in that community, just think about what young women are in your life. And it could be an employee that you have, it could be an intern, it could be a niece. I've coached sports for many, many years, and that's actually what kind of put this idea into my head, is that I realized that the influence I had over the girls that I trained was massive, that
Yeah.
so many of them saw me as a mentor. I realized it wasn't actually about the football at all.
Yeah.
It was about my role there was to build them as young women and to support them. And I realized that for many of them, I was the only person in their lives who was telling them anything positive about
Yeah.
themselves. And I took that role very, very seriously. So I think it's, if even if on the way home from work today you stop for a carton of milk and there's a young woman in the shop, just tell her something nice. Just say,
Yeah.
"Oh, you've such a lovely smile," or not like um nothing about their appearance, but like every time I interact with a young woman, I'll say, "I love your nails. They're so nice," because that's how they express themselves. Or, that was really good. I loved what you did there. So, like
Hmm.
never, ever, ever underestimate the impact that you have on every young woman, every young person that you come into contact with.
Yeah, so true. Um, if a struggling young person was listening right now, what would you say to them to help them and to help them feel more hopeful?
It depends what they're struggling with. So, if there's a mental health issue there, obviously there's very clear channels for help for that. And you
Yeah.
start with, one trusted adult. But a lot of girls, I feel, don't need mental health support. I feel they need role models, they need
Yeah.
coaching, they need community. So if there's a young girl listening, or a parent of a young
Yeah.
girl who is lost, I would say you need to start by building your army, and your army could be one person, and it could be a mentor. So I would say get a mentor,
Hmm.
if you can. Very few people say no when they're asked to be mentors,
Yeah.
and that could be just, can I meet you once a month? We have a mentorship program here that's been absolutely phenomenal, transformative in terms of the young women that are on it, where they meet people once a month who tell them over and over again what they're capable of,
Yeah.
when they don't see it themselves. So,
Hmm.
definitely build your army. Second of all, think about the way that you talk to yourself and your mindset. There's so many mindset tools, habits that you can start, and they're so easy and they're free.
Yeah.
Even there's one that we use a lot with our girls, which is E+R=O, which is your event plus the response creates the outcome. And we focus way too much on the event, which is the things that we can't control, and not enough on our
Hmm.
response. So whenever somebody comes to me with an issue, that I'm saying, well, how are we going to respond here so we control the outcome? And again, just like all those little tips and tricks as to how you can talk to yourself and take control of your own life, because nobody is going to come and save you. They'll support you, but it's up to you. So I think building your army, building your mindset tools, and talking to yourself a lot kinder.
Very importantly, Tammy, tell me, where can they find the Shona Project? Just tell me all the places.
So our website is shona.ie. We're on Instagram, shona.ie. That's SHONADOTIE. We're on TikTok. We're on LinkedIn. Yeah, we're pretty much everywhere online. Just look us up and you'll find us.
Okay. I have one more question.
Uh-huh.
When you empower young girls, what does that do for society as a whole?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because empowering young women impacts everybody. You know, if you're an employer, and we meet a lot of employers these days that are saying, you know, I'm really finding it hard to, first of all, get young women to come in that are equipped and have the tools to deal with the workforce. But then, second of all, will keep pushing themselves forwards for progression and not holding themselves back. So every employer should care about positive outcomes for young women, because women in leadership is a good thing. That's been proven over and over again. For families, I think is vital. Like, I've had my own kids, I've had issues with mental health at home. And, you know, somebody once told me, you're only ever as happy as your unhappiest child.
Yeah.
So if you're a parent of a child who's having panic attacks every day, and you have to go to work and wait for the phone to ring to go and collect that child every day, that is horrific and frustrating, and also terrifying, because you don't have the answers.
Yeah.
So it helps families, but it also helps communities. And if you have women, young women who become women who know their value and their worth,
Yeah.
they'll have much higher standards when it comes to relationships and who they build families with, which impacts obviously their own children, because they see they have strong females at home and strong role models at home. So, you know, there's really no reason why this shouldn't affect everybody.
Yeah.
And that's why our work is so important and so needed.
That's all for today. Next week, I'll be chatting to international angel healer Sinead DeHora about all things intuition, spirituality, and angels, and how we can empower ourselves by tuning out the noise and learning to trust our inner guidance.